My name is Michael, and I'm a 14-year-old boy who lives with my aunt in the countryside. Now out here, we have no neighbors. The closest place to my house is about 8 miles away. I always loved living out here because I always liked the seclusion, and the road we live by is always dead at night, which makes good for sleep. Now my aunt is always working the night shift, so this means I would be home alone pretty much every night. Long story short, I came home from school on a relatively crappy day, thunderstorms and rain all day and all night, and spent my day playing video games and Snapchatting my friends. At around 9 o'clock, my aunt came upstairs and told me she was heading off to her job. I was always fine with this because I like being home alone. I had full range of the house and could play loud music all I wanted. Who wouldn't love it? At about 11 o'clock, I started feeling tired and laid down to watch some YouTube and go to sleep. And soon enough, I did. I woke up at some odd hour of the night to somebody knocking on the door. I sat up and muttered, "What the hell?" I thought my aunt had gone home from the night shift and reluctantly went to go answer the door, and out of habit, checked the window beside the door to make sure it was her, but there was nobody there. I thought to myself, probably some stupid kids knocking on my door and running away, and I dismissed it and went back to my room. I checked my phone to realize it was 3 a.m., and the thought of teenagers ding-dong ditching my home was suddenly out of the question, given that it was a Wednesday, and I basically lived in the middle of nowhere. Just as I was thinking, I heard a bang coming from the basement. I jumped and tried to make up an excuse like a noise of the thunderstorm to calm me down. We always kept our basement door locked anyway, out of my aunt's paranoia and fear of someone breaking in. That's when I heard footsteps slowly creaking up the old wooden stairs in my basement. Frozen with fear, I grabbed my phone and called 911. The operator told me to go to an upstairs room in the house and grab a weapon to defend myself. But there was no way I was going to grab a knife from the kitchen, especially when I heard the door being slammed and quickly realized that someone was trying to bust it down. I jumped from my bed and closed my door quietly and hid in my closet like the 911 operator had told me to do. This was easily the scariest moment of my life, but suddenly the bang stopped. But what comes next will haunt me for my life. Whoever it was screamed at the top of their lungs, but it wasn't a normal scream. It was an insane and disgruntled scream. And then I heard the basement door collapse. Now he was full out screaming as he sprinted up the stairs. He went through all the rooms down the upstairs hallway, still screaming, until he reached mine. My door, unfortunately, didn't have a lock on it, and when I heard him open my door, I was paralyzed with fear. I could see him through the shades of my closet. He was still screaming, looking all over my room, even under my bed. But then, after trying to hold my breath for too long, I let out a puff of air. He perked up, looking straight at my closet, and slowly started walking towards it, no longer screaming. I couldn't even breathe at the moment, especially when he just stopped right in front of my closet door. I could see him through the closet, and he had the biggest smile I had ever seen. As soon as he was slowly reaching for the closet doorknob, there was a loud bang at the door, and somebody yelling,
"Police!"
The man quickly ran and tried to run out my window, but failed. As soon as I saw the police tackle him, I instantly ran out of the closet and outside, now realizing that was a stupid move on my part. After a couple of minutes, I saw the police bring the man out in cuffs, but on the way to the car, he stared at me with the biggest smile and the craziest eyes I had ever seen. Watching him ride away with the police was the greatest moment of my life. But what still haunts me today is the face he made as he was standing in front of my closet door, ready to do something horrible. When I was 17 and still in high school, I joined the delayed entry program for the Marine Corps. Beforehand, I was not really in the best shape, a little chubby, but always somewhat muscular. But cardio was the bane of my existence. I decided to start running daily at least a mile minimum to increase my cardio before I shipped to Paris Island. Towards the beginning of fall that year, I stopped using the high school track and decided to start running the bike trail down the street from my house. Starting at my house, the entire trail and back was 3 miles and some change. I did this run daily, nightly, for months with never a worry. One night before I was going to head out for my run, my cousin Boomer showed up to my house. I told him he'd caught me at a bad time because I was just about to leave. He decided to run with me because I had him partially taught in enlisting. We walked to the head of the trail that evening, so he didn't gas before we could get into the run fully. The end of the street near the trail head was always and still is nearly pitch black. Other than the nice bright moon that night, we could see hardly anything. When we got to the trail, we decided to walk past a yard connecting to the trail. The gentleman who owned the house had just gotten a new dog, a big mastiff if I remember correctly. Boomer was always freaked out by dogs, and this particular dog had chased me about 50 yards a few weeks prior. I believe it was because I came running past its backyard, but I can't be sure. I was explaining all of this to him, and we were almost in the clearing past the yard where the deeper woods start. Mid-sentence, I caught something moving through the bush from the corner of my eye and stopped walking and talking, as did Boomer. We assumed it was an asshole dog. It all happened relatively quick, but seemed longer than it could have possibly been, to me at least. We heard rustling in the trees and saw something silver, and it looked tall. I went to ask my cousin what he thought it was, and he had already turned the trail and was making a Usain Bolt pace the way we came. I made another quick glance and soon after followed Boomer. I reached the top of the hill, and Boomer had stopped to wait for me. He'd already put some distance between himself and whatever it was. We looked back down the hill, and there was something standing by Datley in the middle of the trail. The moon shining through the trees was the only light we had to judge what we were seeing. We promptly ran the rest of the way back up the street and up to my house. To me, what was standing in the bike trail will always be a werewolf, and Boomer agrees. The few glimpses I did catch definitely didn't seem human at all. Tall, silvery in color, had to have been furry, and stood on 2 legs. The silhouette from the top of the hill looked to have pointed ears as well. Boomer says he heard snarls, but by the time the events were taking place, I didn't hear much of anything. Another interesting tidbit is a couple years later, on a piece of land connected and less than a mile and a half away, I found some strange footprints while hunting for shed antlers. Also had another strange encounter out, but that is a whole different story altogether. This happened to me many years ago. I think I was 12 at the time. I grew up in a nice neighborhood in an old 2-story Victorian house. We lived in the foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains on a corner of a quiet street. It was a cool area to grow up in, lots of nature to explore, and few fences to stop kids and their dogs from exploring it. I'm the oldest of 4, but at this time, my parents didn't think I was old enough to stay at home taking care of them by myself for a night, so they hired a babysitter to watch us. I had a huge crush on her. She was 17 and gorgeous, so I was okay with this. It was just a normal summer night, warm and with a bright moon. It was late, probably around 11 p.m. My brothers and sisters had gone to bed. I was up reading, and the babysitter was watching TV downstairs. Me and my little brother shared a big room on the second floor that looked out over the front yard. I was reading in my bed when suddenly my brother, in a frightened, tight voice, called my name. I thought he was dreaming, but then he stood bolt upright in bed and stared out the window. This obviously freaked me the fuck out. So I ran over to him. My brother then pointed out what he was looking out at and asked me, "Who is that man?" Down in the front yard, about 20 yards away, was a lanky, long-haired man looking up into the sky. His arms were outstretched and he was slowly spinning. Then he started moaning. I immediately started to panic. This is how some of those horror movies start. I jumped up and ran out into the hallway, for once glad that my parents had not put me in charge. Waiting for me in the hallway were my sisters, who had been woken up by the noise outside, and the babysitter came tearing up the stairs, wide-eyed. Now I was really scared. Nobody knew what to do, and the sitter wasn't offering up any ideas. For some reason, I decided to call our neighbor across the street. He was a true curmudgeon, but he knew us. I guess I figured he wouldn't be scared. I grabbed the phone. He answered after a few rings, and I asked him if he could see anyone out front. We saw him on the front lawn, which he had a clear view of from his house. He was obviously annoyed, but he did go look. A couple minutes later, he returned to the phone and told me there was nothing and I needed to go back to bed. We were in no state to do that at all. I quickly returned to my brother's window and looked again. The moon was flooding the lawn with light, but no man. We tried to listen for the moaning. Nothing but the symphony of crickets. The sitter was not going back downstairs alone, and nobody else was going to sleep anytime soon. We all agreed we should go down together and make sure all the doors and windows were locked. We crept downstairs and quickly broke into two groups to check all the doors. I was with the sitter to check the front, my siblings the back of the house. All went well. Locks were secured, no weirdos barging into the house, but the sitter wanted me to look outside one more time. I was still fucking scared, conjuring up way too many Friday the 13th and Halloween scenes in my head that my friends and I had covertly watched on their cable during sleepovers. But I didn't want to show it in front of the woman of my dreams. Just one more look, and maybe, just maybe, I'd get to be in something like Revenge of the Nerds movie, which was also something I wasn't supposed to watch. So I quietly moved to the front window, which faced the front steps to our door. I craned my neck to look out towards the driveway and back towards the lawn where we had seen him before. Nothing. And then, suddenly, he was there, running full speed at the window. Half his face was gone, a mess of blood and torn flesh. He had blood all down his shirt and on his shorts. The sitter screamed, and I dropped to the floor in the most unmanly way possible. My siblings were crying in the hallway. He started pounding on the front door and yelling incoherently. I remember him saying something along the lines of, "Let me in, please." Even though that seemed extremely polite for a mass murder, there was no fucking way I was going to oblige to that request. Besides, I was frozen in fear on the floor. The most I could muster in a squeaky little boy voice was, Sir, we can't help you. Please go away." At least I did something. Our protector. The sitter was long gone now. He pounded on the door some more, gave a disappointed and helpless final yelp, and staggered off into the night. I just laid there for a little while. After that, my siblings ran upstairs and huddled together. Soon after, 20 minutes or so, we saw lights and sirens. The sitter had done the same thing in her flight into the bowels of our home, and did the one thing that had never occurred to the rest of us, which was to call 911. They found the bloody man wandering down the street, and our nightmare was over. Turned out he was a cyclist that went out for a full moon ride on a beautiful summer night, but he didn't see the storm ditch on our corner when he took a tight turn at a high speed. He slid on his face for at least 20 feet. He eventually came to, but he was so delirious from his injuries and the shock that he was off his rocker. He had been wandering around for a while before any of us knew he was there. We found bloody trails crisscrossing the front of the property the next morning. I still feel bad I didn't help him, but I was just a scared kid. My parents didn't go out without us for a while. For years, I was traumatized coming home at night, and nothing ever came of my infatuation. I don't think I ever saw her again. But my brother still loves to mimic what I said that night. Bastard.